Fantastic. Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jacob with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. Have an amazing guest today, Dr. Michael Kirk Moore, a respected 59-year-old physician and former Navy flight surgeon. Thanks for your service, sir. From Utah, faced up to 35 years in prison, not for harming patients, but for honoring his oath to do no harm, Hippocratic oath. With informed parental consent, he administered saline in place of COVID vaccines to children and adults facing coercive mandates that threaten their jobs, education, military service, and even life-saving transplants. Dr. Moore acted out of compassion and ethics, not criminal intent. He treated patients free of charge during the COVID crisis, made house calls, and stood by those whose medical autonomy was under attack. Yet he was relentlessly prosecuted, jailed for 22 days, stripped of hospital privileges and board certification, all for prioritizing informed consent and patient safety. The federal case was riddled with jurisdictional flaws, suppressed evidence, and procedural violations. Still, Dr. Moore remained unwavering. Then on July 12th, less than a month ago, just 5 days into trial, Attorney General Pam Bondi dismissed all charges, publicly recognizing the unjust nature of the prosecution. She credited Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Mike Lee for their advocacy in securing this outcome. This was more than a legal win. It was a stand for truth, ethics, and freedom. Dr. Moore didn't act out of defiance. He acted out of duty, and he was right to stand. And we were right to stand with him. So fantastic, Kirk. I mean, your background, I'm sure, is amazing. We'll talk a little bit about that. But thanks for joining us. And how's everything going right now? After, I mean, it must be a great sigh of relief, having, gone right to the wire and finally getting, let off. But are you completely let off?
Well, as far as I know, I am. I don't think. Well, certainly double jeopardy applies from the federal perspective.
Yeah.
So there would be, I guess, some concerns on the state side. I think it would be suicidal for anybody in our, the state of Utah, given the massive support that we received here,
Right.
for anybody in the state to, try to kind of take up the reins where the federal government had to go or had to end.
Wow. Fantastic. Now, you like I was saying, you overcame incredible odds. Military background, Navy flight surgeon, and a physician. You're doing a great practice, and then you're pushing against medical tyranny, doing the right thing. Not many people did that. Not many people at all. So what was your background as far as like what motivated you to do this?
Well, you mentioned the military side of it. My dad was a career Air Force pilot, actually test pilot from 54 to 74. And he got out in 74 because basically we're going to stick him on a desk job and he wasn't going to be able to fly anymore. And that was his passion. That's the reason why he was there. And so I think so he was 40 years old. He just said, okay, if you're, going to put me on a desk and I'm not going to get, my 20, 30, 40 hours a month of flying, then I'm going to go do that somewhere else. So
I know how it feels. A Navy SEAL, they tried to stick me behind a desk. I was like, I gotta play or otherwise I'm going to go. So I went.
Right. So he, young guy, still at age 40, retired. We were in Italy at the time, so we had been stationed at Aviano Air Force Base. I traveled all over the world. So, I was born in France. My dad was stationed there. Moved back to California for a couple of years while my dad was in Vietnam. So he was did a year tour over in Vietnam, a minimum of 100 missions as a recon pilot flying the F-100. And then came back, and my sister was born in New Jersey. Then shortly after that, we moved back to Italy. So we moved to Italy in 1968.
Wow.
And then when he retired in 1974, we'd been there for 6 years, and my parents liked it there, and they kept us there. We stayed there essentially till 1983. So I grew up in Italy, speak Italian, love the country. I used to love the country. I actually, hold on, I'll take that back. I still love the country. I just don't love where it's ending up and where it's going right now.
Yeah, that's too bad.
And so I finished high school here in the U.S. From 80 to 83. Still living in Italy. And my parents in 1983 moved back to the United States, moved to Florida. And so my dad started his own FBO in Jacksonville, Florida, and a charter service business, jet charter business.
Nice.
And then did that for another 20 years. Then he ended up having a stroke, couldn't fly anymore. By that time, my mom had actually gotten her full commercial pilot's license too. And so they were flying as a, husband and wife, pilot, co-pilot. But, obviously she didn't want to fly without him. So they moved they did the opposite. They moved from Florida to Colorado in retirement, which is what people do the opposite. They move from Colorado to Florida. But my dad always had this passion for, Colorado. They moved to Steamboat Springs.
Beautiful area. Yep.
And then my dad passed in 2019 after his third or fourth stroke. So thank you. I finished finished high school in 83, went on to college, finished that in 1987. I didn't have a very good freshman year because it was my first year of kind of like unsupervised, oversight. Nobody was looking at me, so my grades weren't very good. But I turned it around, ended up still graduating with a, 3.0, 3.1, I think. But not good enough for medical school. So ended up having to do 2 years of graduate school in Philly. I kicked butt the second year by retaking my MCAT exam. I had the choice of schools. I ended up going to Florida, and I went to University of Miami because it was just closer to home, in-state school. So I got a little bit of a discount on education. The Navy paid for the last 3 years of my school. That's where I got the, flight surgery, everything. I did the HPSP program, the Health Professions Scholarship Program. And so when I got out, I knew I wanted to go into surgery, knew I wanted to go into plastics, did my internship year, and then the Navy, how the military is, needs of the Navy, pulled me out and said, hey, we need a GMO flight surgeon. And so I got into the flight surgery program, did 6 months in Pensacola. And I think I can't, don't hold me to this, but, budget cuts and everything else, we're talking about 94. I think I was the last flight surgeon class to actually solo in a T-34. I managed to get all, 13 of my flights out in 6 weeks, I think. There were some days where I did two flights just to kind of, get them done and get them under my belt so that I could kind of meet that criteria. And I soloed in T-34 flying upside down under, over Pensacola Beach. And that was it.
In the jeans, that's good.
Yeah. And then moved to Meridian, Mississippi, was attached to T2 squadron there for the first little bit, for the first year and a half. And then got attached to the last A4 squadron before everything got converted to the newer jet trainer T-45. And the A4 was an awesome aircraft, so much fun to fly. And I mean that's if I wasn't in clinic at the Naval Air Station there, I was always in the ready room, and anytime somebody said, hey, got a seat, I'm first one, let's go. So I got a lot of flight time. I used to have a logbook. I somehow misplaced it or got lost in multiple moves since then. But anyway, had a lot of fun. Came back to training, did 2 more years of general surgery and then 2 years of plastic surgery. Finished my residency in 2001. Moved to Idaho Falls, Idaho for a little bit. Was there for 4.5 years, and then moved down here in the Salt Lake area of Utah. I guess September, October of 2005. So I've been here almost 25 years, or almost 20 years. Sorry. So that's it. That's me. That's my history.
That's amazing. God, that's fantastic. I love all the overseas stations. I wish I'd had that. God.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in the SEAL teams, we're stationed at one base, and then we go overseas for a few months and then come back. So yeah, that must have been a fantastic life. Wow, good for you.
Well, and I did a lot more traveling, actually, Michael. When my dad was flying for that Italian aircraft company, I spent 3 weeks in Pakistan in 1978. I spent 3 weeks in Bolivia in 1979, and then I spent another 3 weeks. Bolivia was 1980, and 1979 was Somalia. And on all three of those trips, we flew in my dad's Beechcraft Baron. So we flew from Italy to Pakistan, and then we flew from Italy to Somalia, and then we were back in the U.S. at that point, or my dad was. But so we flew from South Florida to Bolivia. I was in Bolivia when they had a coup, and we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. There were tanks rolling outside the hotel, and my sister and I were there. We were great. We don't have to do any of the tourist stuff. We can just sit here by the pool. we were happy. We weren't going to to see some ruins or go do some hiking or something somewhere. We're just kind of like, oh, good, we can't leave. Let's just stay here.
That's probably the same thing my kids were thinking too. Whenever I took them everywhere, we were always doing that stuff too. So right. Wow, what a fantastic life. And so here you are. COVID-19 comes in, and you're going to do the right thing. Tell us about that.
Well, I think I'll take just a little, for a one step back. 1989 was when I started medical school. At the time, the hepatitis B shot was given to people at risk. And so as starting in medical school, because I was going to be exposed to patients and, blood products and so on, I was at risk for hepatitis B. So, I got the first of the 3-shot, regimen, and, I got shingles. I mean, within 24 hours, I had a huge spot of shingles about the size of I don't know, a little bit bigger than a golf ball right here in my left armpit. And it hurt like hell. But there was no denying it to me. I was not a doc yet. I just started medical school, probably first couple of weeks that I was there. But that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I didn't get the other 2 shots. It's just like, no, I'm not doing that. And living over in Italy, I don't know. I know I have a smallpox because I had, I've got the scar from it. But other than that, I probably had the oral polio vaccine, and that's all I had. I may have had the occasional tetanus shot growing up, here and there, or something like that. But so that kind of gave me a lot of skepticism regarding vaccines in general. My mom had a lot of friends that would get the flu shot, and then within a few weeks be diagnosed with ALS. And so I just kind of had this is my background. My daughter was born in 2003. We started her on a very modified vaccine schedule, but when she was a little over 2 years old, she got a shot, ended up in the emergency room. We were living in Idaho at the time, ended up having to bring her down to Salt Lake to the children's hospital here. And the only thing that they could figure out was, well, we don't really know what's going on, but we should take her gallbladder out. I'm like, she's 2 years old, so we left out of the hospital AMA, and that's the last shot we ever got. Well, that's not true. I went to Ghana on a humanitarian trip, and in order to get in the country, I had to, and I took my family. So, all 4 of us had to get the yellow fever shot, but I figured, one shot out of, 500 or whatever, isn't going to, hopefully won't damage us. I mean, I tried to bribe the nurse and she wouldn't take it. But yeah, so that's my history. So,
and you're like me. When I was a SEAL, we were noticing my other, teammates. We noticed that guys would get sick when they got shots, and we're like, we're not going to do that. So we learned to work around shots, kind of like what we're probably going to talk about. But I remember, people getting shots when I worked in the CIA for about 11 years, and the bird flu stuff was going around, and guys were getting shots of, case officers and stuff, and we're like, no, we're not going to get that. And then guys would get sick, and they couldn't figure it out.
Right.
And we're like, you got the vaccine. What are you thinking? So I mean, it was obvious.
So they were baffled back then too, just like they're still baffled now. It's like you ought to, with all this baffling, these people ought to be smart enough to figure that out, right?
You would think so.
Yeah. Look, I did the same thing in the military. When I was on clinic duty, and anybody came in, I wouldn't give them the shot. I just, here, it's time for the flu shot. Yep. Oh, you're doing your tetanus shot. I mean, the military, you guys were, you were in there longer than I was, but, we were guinea pigs, I mean, it's just kind of like, it was just like any shot that come out, we're the first ones, anthrax in the early 2000s. It's just kind of like, and I've since done a whole bunch of research on it. And, I will never, ever get another shot, and I will never recommend any shots for anybody else. So
that's the way I feel too. And I have a lot of friends that they didn't get shots. They didn't give their kids shots, and their family is like ultra healthy. Yeah. So there's vaccines. There's something to it, and I appreciate research. You've done the research, and you did some amazing things, when the COVID came out and the COVID-19 vaccine came out, did the same thing. You're like giving people saline shots. So that was fantastic.
Well, again, it's, I'm a plastic surgeon, that. Okay. So I did my training, did my plastic surgery, but I had a lot of primary care experience. And I'm looking for a quote here. Sorry if I look distracted. And so a lot of people that knock what I did and what I was doing and everything else, saying, what's a plastic surgeon doing, what he's doing? I'm a doc first and a plastic surgeon second. So I did all the same training that all the, at least from the medical school perspective, I have all the same microbiology experience that everybody else has. Here it is. I never saw a case of cancer in an unvaccinated person. W.B. Clark, MD, 1936. Okay. So I never saw a case of cancer in an unvaccinated person, 1936. And the only vaccines that they had going right there were the kind of experimental meningococcal vaccine, which caused the 1918 Spanish flu, and the smallpox vaccine. That's before polio, because polio didn't come out until the early 1950s. So, he's already seeing that before, the massive, kind of launch of, anything else. So, it's, it's crazy. Just like we were talking about, people are still baffled.
Yeah. But it's suppressed, and there's another campaign to educate people otherwise. And so it's an uphill battle. Now, if you get out of line, they have ways to get you back in line. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, so COVID comes around, early 2020. I'm like, hey, this sounds like a really bad virus. I'm seeing same thing that everybody else is seeing. I'm seeing the incinerators going crazy in China and all the heat maps. And I'm seeing, the videos of people just keeling over. I'm seeing all the people dressed in hazmat suits and the empty streets in Wuhan. And I didn't know any better. I'm still working full time. I'm just kind of catching little glimpses of it, trying to read and research and, and everything else. So I closed up my office. I see the stuff going on in Italy. Obviously, as you know, I'm partial to Italy. So that was just south of where I grew up. I knew the area. I can't say that I've been there, but I just knew of the area. It's just reminded me a lot of, what I call my hometown. So I'm just kind of, wow, this is really crazy. This has got to be dangerous. I've got two young kids. 2020, my daughter was, 17. She was a senior in high school. My son was in seventh grade. I'm just kind of like, I can't afford to get exposed to this and bring it home to my kids. I was raising them by myself. And so I just, it's just kind of like, I can't do this. So I closed my office. And then within no more than 36 hours, I did not. I'm sitting on the same laptop now that I was sitting on then, probably in a very similar place. And although it's probably too cold, it was March. I'm not sitting outside in March. But but I'm just sitting there and I'm researching and I'm looking and I'm reading articles and I'm looking at this, at this virus, and I'm looking at what it is that's going on and what they're saying. And I go back and read through kind of like, the stuff that Drosten put out and all of these things early on in 2020, late 2019, early 2020. And I'm like, there's 44 total cases and only one death by the end of January. And I'm just like, how do we have, this pandemic? What is it that's going on? And then you have, like I said, you have this just scare going on in Italy and France. The first case that we had here in Seattle, and then New York gets hit. Then we start sending, COVID patients home with, or COVID patients out of the hospital back to their nursing homes. And then, all these other people in their nursing homes ended up dying. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And so I just did a full 180, and I started researching and looking. Came across Dr. Zelenko, Vladimir Zelenko, who was treating people early. Brian Tyson, George Fareed in California. The FLCCC came up shortly after that. Dr. Peter McCullough. I just started, just looking and researching. The first flag that I always tell everybody, the first flag to me is there's no treatment. And I'm just like, what do you mean there's no treatment? Yeah. It's kind of like, we've always just treated the symptoms of the flu because we never really were able to kind of find the cure for the flu. But we would always treat the symptoms. And when you look at what this was flu symptoms, fever, chills, not feeling good, loss of taste and smell, which happened with the flu before this anyway. And so I'm just like, what makes this any different? And I didn't think of any of the nefariousness. I didn't think of anything at first. I was just like, I'm just going to start treating people. Then when you start seeing that, the second flag for me was when you start seeing the, all 206 countries in the world are doing the exact same thing, right? Just kind of like, how is that happening? Why is it that, we have all 200 countries are doing the exact same thing, pulling hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin off the shelves, saying that there's no treatment, telling people that, the next best thing when you're almost dead, call an ambulance, bring you into the hospital, we'll ventilate you, and maybe, 10-15% of the time you'll survive. And that just didn't make any sense to me. And so again, I just kind of
I lost YouTube channels, and it got really suppressed. I had a huge YouTube channel at the time. I talked about hydroxychloroquine, sunlight, vitamin D, vitamin C, all the stuff that Dr. Zelenko was putting out,
right,
recommending his formulas and everything. And I got taken off of YouTube.
I got canceled off of Facebook. I got put in Facebook jail so many times that I finally just canceled my account. It just wasn't worth it anymore. I lost my Twitter account twice. I really wasn't that huge into social media. Those were the two places that I went. I didn't have an Instagram. Well, I had an Instagram channel, but I'd only posted once back in 2011. I don't really know Instagram. I don't understand it. And, just another thing. Never really was on Snapchat like all the kids were. So, I was just doing what I did. I started treating people. Okay. That's where I got into trouble, and that's where I got canceled. I started treating people, posting articles from, the people that we just talked about, and posting videos that they had online. And that's what was getting me, suspended and canceled and, shut down and everything else. But I started treating people. I started letting it be known, that through my neighborhood chat, and all of that, I was there. First of all, for the whole month of last part of March and pretty much the month of April, I think till the 26th, we were closed. And so I was just treating people over the phone, people knocking on my door, texting me. I was calling in prescriptions. Later in the year, I was going and doing house calls. I was taking people out of the hospital. I was putting them on high dose IV steroids. I never had one patient die. Not one. I never had one patient go to the hospital. Not one. It was just like, it just didn't make any sense to me. And, there's a lot of other docs that were out there doing the same thing, and all of them are getting canceled too, Okay. Like you said, anything that you posted about hydroxychloroquine or HCQ, and then, all that, or I didn't start treating ivermectin until later in the year. But that was just my, that was my experience. And you saw the Supreme Court steps, the SCOTUS, kind of frontline, or America's Frontline Doctors that were on there, and it had millions of views within 24 hours. And then they got canceled.
Yeah.
And Stella Emanuel is a hero of mine. She kind of just like her speech out there on the steps just kind of still gives me goosebumps. Anyway, so that was my early 2020. Then you start hearing the third strike for me was, and I already told you, and this is the reason why I brought that up. Third strike for me was, we're not going to get back to normal until we put a needle in everybody's arm. And so to me, I already told you my skepticism and cynicism regarding, vaccines in general. And then to me, that was like, okay, now this is evil. This is, that there's something here that's going beyond just, just treatment and not wanting to treat people with COVID and had all the stuff. You have remdesivir that now is out on the market that would, that had been taken off of the Ebola trials because it had a higher mortality rate than the Ebola virus itself. And so all of a sudden it's the treatment of choice and the only choice for the hospital protocols. It's just, it just didn't, none of it made sense. And so that just further, further ingrained in me that, there's an evil concept to this that, that just didn't, that didn't jive.
Yeah. So, what's amazing is, they came after you, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but, just not even a month ago, Pam Bondi came in and, gave you a reprieve. And it was like, do you know of doctors like yourself that are still being prosecuted out there?
I actually don't know of any of the doctors that were. I know some nurses and nurse practitioners that were prosecuted. I know of a pharmacist in Chicago. All of them, though, had a different aspect to it. Every single one of those people was making money, and they were charging for their quote unquote services, and they made money. There were two business guys, I guess you would call them, just regular guys, one from Utah, one from New York. And they sold 140,000 actual fake cards. They went to, a print shop, printed them off. They sold 140,000 of them on eBay for $10 a piece. And they were prosecuted by the same prosecutor that was the lead prosecutor in my case. And those guys, they made $1.4 million between the two of them. Okay. They got a $40,000 fine and a 1 year in jail sentence. I don't know what the pharmacist in Chicago was doing the same thing. He was actually stealing COVID cards from the Walgreens pharmacy, I believe it was, that he was working for. And then he got convicted. His appeal was just upheld. So he lost his appeal. So I'm sure that he's going to be sentenced here soon for something. I don't know, a lot more of the particulars about, how much money he made or what. And then there was a couple of nurses, either a nurse and a nurse practitioner or somebody in New York that also were doing something similar. I think early on in COVID, there was a case with a nurse practitioner that they went and raided her house and they found like $960,000 in cash in her house where she was paying. She was charging like, I don't know, $150 for kids and $250 for adults or something to get a COVID card, and she got busted. To me, I didn't want to get caught for fraud. So I was just like, I just said, I'm not going to charge for it. I don't want to charge for it. The reason I even had people donate is because I had patients of mine say, hey, how can I help you out? I said, here, donate to this organization that's trying to help pass laws here in the state of Utah to kind of prevent this from happening ever again. And so they did, it was, that, but we never made any money. I mean, I think
I remember there was a nurse in Germany too that had saline vaccinated like hundreds of people, thousands.
8,600. And she got let off. She lost her license and she got let off with like a suspended sentence for like 6 months or something like that. It was really minor. And that was early on too. So that was I believe in 2021, the case was in 2022, but yeah. And even in a kind of socialist country like Germany, they kind of let her off, which is kind of the opposite. They've got that attorney, Rainer Fulmick, that's in jail and has been in jail for essentially exposing all of this stuff. And he's been in jail in solitary confinement for over a year now. Still, I think he just had his trial and they convicted him of some, just basically bogus charges. So what's the difference between him and, and that nurse? Why'd they let the nurse off and for actually having done something, as opposed to Reiner Fomek, who is, just exposing the grift and exposing the crime behind all this.
Right.
It's kind of
she probably, like you, had a lot of people that were behind her and helped her. So that makes a difference. I think if we, the people, get involved, like in your case, and then I don't know what happened with her, but Reiner Fomek, I mean, that guy was like, he should have the whole world behind him. So it's kind of baffling to me. Yeah,
I agree with you.
So why do you think there's a difference between we're using you as an example, but that was you're a very slim example. You almost got hammered. They were going to put you away for like 35 years, right?
Well, I mean, they could have. That was the max sentence. Most of the time you don't get the max sentence.
Sure.
There's if I'd have been convicted, it would have been on a kind of like a fraud conviction, I guess. And there's a chart that, says, hey, first time conviction, this is what you should get. I think so initially it was 15 years, maximum charges with fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and the counterfeiting charge that I had. In January of this year, January of 25, they added an additional charge because one of my co-defendants decided to testify for them and told them that I had told her to get rid of the vaccine after we were indicted. So then they charged me with destruction of government property and evidence tampering, which carries a 20-year charge. And turned out to be false. I mean, it turned out that even her testimony proved that I never asked her to do that, and also that even if they had been destroyed at my request, because they were all expired legally, I was required to destroy them. So
I say it was in January. Was that before Trump was inaugurated or after?
Yeah, so really interesting is January 11th, I believe, is what our court date was. Mm-hmm. So they kind of pushed to get a superseding indictment before the Trump administration was in. Although I don't know. Right after his inauguration, there was a guy by the name of Dr. Eitan Haim, a surgeon in Houston, Texas, who had also been indicted by the federal government as a whistleblower because he was exposing the transgender surgeries that Texas Children's Hospital was doing. And so the federal government went after him for HIPAA violations, which he never really did. And he was fighting. And then on January 24th, so only 4 days after Trump was inaugurated, his case got dismissed. And I'd swear I thought my case was next, because I'm up there. Here's a federal case. His case gets dismissed, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, mine. I'm sure they're looking at mine. They'll dismiss mine too, and that wasn't the case.
So is this where eventually Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Mike Lee got involved and helped inform Pam Bondi, Attorney General Pam Bondi, about your case?
No, that didn't happen until trial. In March of this year, when Trump was inaugurated, he started the weaponization work group. And then when Pam Bondi was sworn in as the Attorney General, she then, kind of took over. And I think within hours or day of her being, sworn in, she had a press conference and she, talked about the weaponization work group, and she put together this work group, this committee that was going to look at kind of Biden era weaponization of the, Justice Department, mainly surrounding, the January 6th guys, but also related to just kind of weaponization of the, of the legal system, lawfare, those kinds of things. And I thought that, hey, okay, well, I didn't get my case dismissed in January, but now that this weaponization work group is in place, and we're kind of waiting because the members of this committee were the the U.S. attorney for civil rights, which was Harmeet Dillon, another U.S. attorney for like legal services or something, which was at the time was Aaron Reich, and then the deputy attorney general, and I'm blanking on his name right now. So those three people kind of had to be in place. So it took a while for them to get in and for them to be confirmed and sworn in and everything else. And so after all of that happened, we ran my case up that flagpole. And hoping that, okay, well, now we have this weaponization work group, it certainly feels like it comes within legal services, certainly comes within the Civil Rights Commission and everything else. And then about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks later, we get a letter from them that they're not gonna intervene in my case. So we're like, okay, well, I guess we're going to trial. And so that's all we did, was just spend time doing that. I was trying to get more exposure for our case and did a couple of podcasts. I did one with Shannon Joy, and then I did one with Ed Zoll and Matt Scow from Died Suddenly. And Ed Zoll kind of like got really ticked off about it, and so he actually flew out here and was here the whole week of my trial, starting July 7th, taking notes, posting things on X, and just telling people about it, kind of building up some momentum and groundswell. We had a rally on July 7th with some speakers. My son had a speech that day that went viral. And then throughout the course of the week, so then Ed Zoll put together an article that he published either Wednesday or Thursday that I think was the one that kind of hit MTG's desk. And then that's when she posted about it. Thomas Massey posted about it. So did my Senator Lee. And then Friday we had a much bigger rally with both Matt Scow and Ed Zoll. Shannon Joy flew in from New York, so it was a much bigger crowd, much bigger kind of presentation that was live streamed on X, and so that carried a lot of weight. I think that's kind of when it made it. Margie Taylor Greene, told me personally that she had called multiple times, sent this letter, and left a bunch of messages and said, hey, look, this can't happen. Senator Mike Lee did the same. So then Saturday morning, the case was, at 8:30 in the morning on Saturday morning. Actually, well, 8:35 my time, just to be exact. I got a phone call from my attorney saying that our case was dismissed.
Wow. Whew.
I know.
So, how about the senators and congressmen there in Utah? Did any of them get behind you?
Well, Senator Lee, I met him in February.
He's Utah senator.
He's the Utah U.S. The senior Utah senator. John Curtis is a first. He's a freshman senator. He came over from the House. I've met him as well at I went to a bunch of political things just to try to introduce myself to people. So he knows about my case. He just said, hey, here, call my chief of staff, and then never heard from him again. We had some local House members, the Utah House itself, the Speaker of the House, Mike Schultz, was at that rally on Monday. There were a couple of other members that have spoken out on our behalf, Trevor Lee, and Carrie Ann Lisenby, local kind of, politicians. But from, we actually have a super majority of conservative members here, and the vast majority of them were stone cold silent.
Even Burgess Owens, huh?
I met Burgess Owens. He knows about my case. Okay. Nothing.
That's too bad. I had him on a show one time, and I thought it was outstanding. So I was kind
of. I've always liked the guy. I always like what he says, and and everything else. But the problem, I don't know what happens. These guys lose principle. They lose their commitment to standing on their principles, and especially when you're on a 2-year reelection cycle. You're constantly campaigning, and so you get in this position where you just don't want to be too outspoken about anything to kind of try to alienate anybody at either end. And I mean, that's just, I don't know. That's probably why I can never be a politician, because I would never be able to tread those.
Not the current format. Absolutely not. Maybe in the future if they clean it all up. But
yeah.
Now you talk about the military side too. The military's, and thank you for that. So I'm gonna read a little piece that's from your from the bio that you sent. Your victory is a step, but not the end. Across the country, and especially within our military, honorable men and women are still being punished, like you, for speaking the truth. Commander Rob Green is one of them. He is currently under active investigation and facing blatant whistleblower retaliation for publishing Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines, and for calling out admirals and generals who violated the law and trampled constitutional rights. Now, I thought for sure that the military wouldn't get vaccinated, but so I was dumbfounded. So obviously, we saw a lot of these admirals and generals get behind this thing, so they got pressure, or they were just all on board with it for whatever reason. So, what are your thoughts on that, the military side?
Well, I don't think anybody should be punished for anything that they stand up for, whether you're in the military, whether you're anything else. I'm a free speech absolutist. I think that if you yell fire in a crowded movie theater and somebody dies, you should be held liable. But if you yell fire in a crowded movie theater and it ends up being a fake alarm, that's still your right to have done that. You just need to be aware of what the potential consequences of you having done that. But if you want to do that, then you should be allowed to do it. And so I don't think anybody, just because you're in the military, just because you're in some job somewhere, or just because you're under some chain of command, that you should not be able to speak your mind. Unfortunately, we've gotten way too sensitive about, people being, getting their feelings hurt over what somebody says.
Yeah.
And if you write a book and you're pushing back against your commanding officers and you're right, then why are you being punished? These people need to, I say this all the time in the health freedom movement. We need to leave our egos at the door and realize that you're going to have differences of opinion. You're never going to agree 100% with anybody. You just need to, you just need to kind of be able to trust that, what you're saying, and stand by and be able to kind of support what it is that you're saying. And if you can't, then you should suffer the consequences. But if you're right about something, then those people need to have, enough gonads and enough balls to be able to say, okay, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. And I'll correct it. I mean, I don't know where we got in humanity where we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's very polarized now. So that freedom of speech, I went to a J6 trial with his grandmother, and the judge said, "I don't want to hear any of this free speech bullshit," to her and her lawyer during the trial, and it was railroad. I was dumbfounded. No justice there. Now, she got pardoned the day before she was supposed to report to jail, but she says she and all the other people that were involved in J6 that basically stood trial and got convicted, like almost 1,500 of them. It's crazy. That it's still on their record. They still don't have, freedom from that, because they got freedom. They're out of jail. They didn't go to jail. They're happy about that. But on their record, they still have felonies, and it hurts. How about yourself?
Well, I think those people, even, their convictions ought to be completely overturned. The struggle is, and it's each state is a little bit different. Even with a pardon, there are different states take things differently. In the state of Utah, had this gone, to a conviction on my end, and then I'd happen to get a pardon, by Donald Trump, if he would have done that, the state of Utah allows you to completely expunge your record so that you don't have it. Other states do not necessarily allow that. I think there should be, if you're completely pardoned and you basically get an apology from the federal government for something that they did to you that was wrong, that should never be part of your record and should never follow you anywhere else. I mean, I had TSA pre-check forever. As soon as I got indicted, it's gone. And so now I have to go through, even though my case was dismissed, I have to go through two processes. I have to go through and get my case expunged. And then I also have to go through and I have to request that my fingerprints and my DNA that they gathered from me early on in the case gets expunged. And they're two completely different processes, but you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, it should be automatic, right? Yeah. I mean, it just should be, oh, okay, well, you got a pardon. If you got your sentence commuted, that's different. Because that means that you're still guilty, but they thought that the sentence was maybe too long or something. That's a completely different deal. But any of these people here that get pardoned or get dismissed or get their cases, released or spent some of these people have spent 2.5, 3 years in jail, some in solitary confinement without even having gone to court yet. I mean, we don't live in a country where we're supposed to have political prisoners. And the whole Biden administration had hundreds of people that were political prisoners in our jails, for walking onto the grounds of the state capitol that they own. They weren't violent. They didn't do anything. The only violence was the guard that killed, what was that lady's name?
The one, yes, he shot her.
Yeah. And then, it's just, it's lawfare, okay, and it's not just in this realm. It's lawfare in general now, all over our country, in almost any in any process, political, economic, medical, you name it. We've gone off the rails in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, you spent 22 days in jail. That's you think it'd be some kind of restitution that would come your way. But they're just going to deny all that stuff. Ashley Babbitt was
Ashley Babbitt, correct? Yeah.
So and you don't see that from the government, especially when it comes to J6 or this COVID scam that they pulled on us. How many people do you think that, by your estimate, that you actually helped?
Somebody asked me that question the other day. Yeah. I probably took care of, in 2020 alone, 800 to 1,000 people that were looking for treatment with COVID. I took care of, on paper, I had 2,270 vaccines that were delivered to me. I probably had at least 50% more than that came to my office that we never even registered. And, so that's, 3,500, 3,300, something like that. Plus that, and I was treating people for COVID throughout this whole time too. Some of them ended up coming to me for vaccine treatments, and some of them did not. So rough numbers are, 4,000 to 5,000.
Wow. And you mentioned, COVID vaccine treatment, because there's a lot of people that are suffering from the vaccine itself.
Yeah.
Have you helped a lot of those people as well?
So I haven't gotten it. I've helped some. It's an interest of mine, obviously, with, all of the other things going on. I had not been able to kind of really spend a lot of time trying to take care of that. That's one of my next goals is to try to, figure out how to get some research, and to, to get involved in the treatment of, the vaccine injured people. Because, there's 50 times as many people that are vaccine injured as the ones that died. There were 20 times, I guess, if you look at the VAERS numbers. There was almost 1 million or over 1 million people that have reported to VAERS a severe adverse event from the vaccine, and 40,000 deaths. 40,000. Swine flu vaccine in the 1970s was taken off with less than 50 deaths. Okay. Vioxx, which was a medication with less than 40 deaths, was taken off the market. And actually Vioxx may have been even less than that. I think it may have even been less than, it may have been double digits deaths that were directly attributed to people taking Vioxx. So we have 40,000 reported deaths on VAERS right now, or just under.
I'm glad you say that. reported, because theirs is grossly underreported. I think those numbers are extremely high, unfortunately.
Yeah. So it's anywhere from 1%. So we're talking about anywhere from 1 to 10%. So, if it's 10%, then there's 400,000 deaths. And if it's 1%, it's 4 million deaths. Okay.
Yeah.
4 million deaths directly attributed. And a lot of people will say that that's the case, really close to it.
Yeah. And then the people that got vaccinated, unfortunately, so I've been following this for years. I've talked about it like you. I saw it in the beginning. I was like, there's something wrong here. Better be careful. And in early January, I started, blowing the whistle on all that stuff. And then, it just got worse and worse and worse. And then I had, started seeing the anomalies. It didn't make sense, like yourself. And I started having lots of people on my show to talk about this. God, hundreds of people came out and talked about it. And I even heard that the vaccination was going to be compromised with bad stuff in it before it came out. Yeah. So, maybe you did too. So, but we know they do. All of them do. And so, we're trying to help people know this, but still people get vaccinated, still people are dying, and still people are, this sudden adult death syndrome. There's people dying, and instead of going, oh, he died of heart attack, or it's, no, they don't even report it.
Right. They don't report it. They don't do autopsies. That's where the term baffling comes in. The doctors are baffled, why this 32-year-old, marathon runner just keeled over dead, at mile 13 of some race somewhere. You've got, it's the numbers are astonishing. And you just kind of like, how are these people baffled? What I struggle with, Michael, is as a doctor, one of the things that we were told from day one of medical school is something called the differential diagnosis. Okay. So you have somebody that comes to see you and they have abdominal pain. Okay. You as a physician need to start out with an open mind as to what anything and everything that can cause abdominal pain. Okay. Anything, A to Z. You don't rule anything out until you do a much more careful history, until you start, until you do a physical exam on the patient, until you get, hey, what medications are you taking? Where have you been? What exposure have you had? Have you traveled anywhere? You do some targeted testing, whether it be, x-rays or CT scans or lab tests or stool samples or, further testing, whether it be colonoscopies or or endoscopies, any number of those things. And those are only done as part of you trying to determine exactly what it is that's going on. But the point is that you need to kind of keep everything on your list until you've ruled it out. Mm-hmm. And so somebody who gets a shot within hours or days or weeks or months of whatever it is before the start of this problem that they have, that needs to be looked at, that needs to be evaluated, it needs to be part of that list. And what's happened is that, these people these docs and everybody are so brainwashed that they don't even include it as part of their differential. It's just by belief, by rote, they just eliminate it. Oh, that can't cause it, so I'm not even going to look at it. And that's just so wrong. It's not part of medicine. And I don't know how these people go to sleep at night knowing that they're misdiagnosing or not diagnosing people just because their beliefs keep them from looking and from having an open mind and looking at it. And it's astonishing to me. And it's really, it's disappointing and it disillusions me. And it's just, with all the data and science, there's 4,000 articles now out about the complications that people have had with the COVID vaccine. Young, healthy people. I mean, I was talking to a guy the other day. I can't remember if it was online or what, but he said he had a 7-year-old kid with metastatic pancreatic cancer. 7 years old. Okay. I mean, never seen that. ever.
Mm.
Okay. And, I don't know how many shots that he had. Probably at least 3. Because if he got it in 2023, when they approved this for, 5-year-old and 5 and under, or 6-month-old and over, he probably, that was 3 years ago. He was 4 years old. So he probably had one. I remember sitting on an airplane flight in 2023 with some guy who was an engineer or something, saying that he was just so happy that, he was able to get his kids vaccinated. He'd just taken his 7-year-old and 9-year-old kids in to get a COVID vaccine right before he got on a flight. Just like, boy, people are just, they're so snowed and so brainwashed, and just believe that narrative of safe and effective that's been around for 250 years, that it's crazy. Is that too loud with that in the background?
No. It's
Okay.
noise cancellation is working, so I can't even hear it.
Okay. Yeah, there's God.
Yeah, that's the problem. Now, with your case, fortunately, we got some resolution. Do you think this is going to be a precedence for more cases to be resolved and overturned? I can't believe at this point that it's still going on. I think they're counting on people just forgetting and just moving on. And while doctors like yourself and other people that push back on it are still being prosecuted and sentenced. It's crazy to me.
Well, that's what they want, right? That's what they want. They want us to forget and move on. They want to forget about a loss of liberty and all the tyrannical, imposition of, kind of 6-foot distancing and wearing a mask, and, closing down businesses and ruining people's lives and livelihoods, taking away their jobs, and that's not even counting all the people that have been, vaccine injured and damaged and died. And there's still people that are out there. The problem is that there's still people that are out there, and they're experts. These families or whatever, their experts are their doctors. And a 32-year-old dies from metastatic colon cancer, and the doctor just says, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that. It's just kind of bad luck." And you're just kind of like, wait a minute, it's not just bad luck. Why did a 32-year-old get colon cancer? And why was it metastatic at diagnosis? Why is it like a turbo cancer? How did that happen? There's no curiosity. There's no level of discernment on any of these people to try to figure out, hey, what is really going on here? Because they don't have an open mind. They're just so closed-minded. They don't think about it. It's kind of crazy. It's more than kind of crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah, it's mass psychosis and MK Ultra programming. Really, they've mastered it. Obviously, lots of people are still suffering. Now, for you, what are your plans in the future?
Well, my short-term goal right now is to try to figure out and do everything that I can to get at least these mRNA shots off the market. 6-month-old healthy baby should not be getting 3 COVID shots before they're 9 months old. My personal bias is there's never been a baby that's been born on Earth that is vaccine deficient. And so I don't think that any babies ought to be getting any vaccines over anything. But I'll start with the mRNA shots just because of the real severe complications that we're seeing and the death. And, we're going to see this huge sharp rise in SIDS deaths. And because we're already seeing it in the SADS deaths, the sudden infant death syndrome and the sudden adult death syndrome. We didn't have sudden adult death syndrome. It wasn't even a thing until 2021. And I don't know. It's just so that's my primary goal, is to spread the word, try to get things out there, try to tell people my story, try to get more people to be, kind of stand up, push back, and be bold and realize that, this is an evil narrative. And, depending on what rabbit hole you go down and who you want to believe or not believe, it's not just about COVID. I think COVID was invented for the vaccine, not the other way around.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. Big profits on that. And I know Kennedy is pushing back on that, but do you think
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think he's being held back by the administration. I don't think a guy's going to get himself and put himself into that position after 25, 30 years of what he's done just to then, turn his back on everybody. I think he's doing the best he can right now. I think he's being, hamstrung. He's trying to do it with two hands tied behind his back and a muzzle over his mouth. But I mean, I think that if he's able to kind of, continue to get some more science and data and information out there, that he might be able to change some people's minds. I think Donald Trump still believes that Operation Warp Speed was the next best thing since sliced bread. John Rich has told him, you've seen the video, I think, on X, where John Rich told him exactly why he's getting booed at his rallies when he was, running for, Congress. I mean, he's got some people in his ear. Susie Wiles is an ex-chief legal counsel for Pfizer. She's, there's nothing that's going to convince her that Pfizer is doing anything wrong. I think the more, I mean, we're 5 years into this, Michael, we are 5 years into this, and we're still saying that, what's going on. We're still killing people. We're still murdering and maiming humanity, killing our babies. Something's got to be done about it. And hopefully it's sooner than later.
Well, Kirk, you're definitely a hero in my eyes. And I think a lot of other people too. We just want people to do the right thing. If we have more people like yourself just do the right thing, this would probably go away very quickly. We need more people to stand up to get behind this. So it's not, another 5 years and there's still people being prosecuted. That's ridiculous to me.
Right.
And people dying on a massive scale. At this point, it would seem to me, because I know so many people that have died from the COVID vaccination, and the boosters and all that stuff. The more boosters you get, the greater your chance of dying now. The evidence is out there. I can't understand how people are still compromised mentally. They can't see that. But yeah, thanks for all that you're doing. How can people reach you if they want to?
Well, I'm gonna throw one more statistic out there, which is really eye-opening. Okay, Michael. There was an article that was just published a couple of weeks ago. I can't cite the journal at a name, but it was Nick Hulsher and Peter McCullough from the Wellness Clinic highlighted it. The loss of life expectancy in the United States is on the order of 30 years. Okay, 30 years. If you've had 2 shots or more, the expectation is that you are going to lose 30 years of life expectancy. Wow. The more shots you have, obviously, the less. So a 30-year-old now with 2 shots of COVID vaccine or 2 shots of a Pfizer Moderna shot, or, or whatever it is that they got, is not expected to live past the age of 55.
Wow.
So that's scary. All right. Now, obviously, we don't know that. That's a statistical calculation based upon what it is that we're seeing with the rise of, mortality rates in young people. They claim myocarditis is or in the COVID vaccine, and COVID vaccine injured myocarditis patients. It's mild and transitory. That's BS. I don't know of any case of myocarditis that is mild and transitory. It certainly never goes away. There might be some things that we can do to treat it, but it never goes away. The damage that's been done to your heart is irreversible, at least according to what we know about human biology at this point. So nothing is transitory from the damage that people get from these COVID vaccines. So that's why these things have to get taken off the market. I can be found at on Twitter at Moore22K, Dr. Kirk Moore on Facebook and Instagram. I'd already told you before, I don't get on those that much. Yeah. If there's questions that people have and they find me on there, my staff will forward it to me, and I'll typically answer them as quickly as I can. But at Moore22K is my main social media push. So I'm happy to have people follow me. We still have a Give Send Go account. I've spent myself spent $750,000. That's not counting what Chris Anderson has spent on her legal defense, who is my co-defendant. So, it's, any help can, anybody that can help us there. It's give, send, go / fight for more with the number 4 and MOORE. So
we have all your links in the description box. So if
okay.
anybody, wants to help you out, which I'm definitely going to help you out. So I'm just stunned that we're still dealing with this, but I appreciate I highly regard all of your work that you're doing right now. You're definitely a hero, and I look forward to some success in the future. If anything comes up, let us know, and we'll have you back on. We'd love to have you back on again. Just keep spreading this word. It makes a difference. Obviously, people get involved, and we make things happen. So thanks a lot, Dr. Kirk.
Well, we won a battle. we need to win this war. So I'm out there to do it.
Good point. All right, thank you, sir, and have a great day, and we'll see you guys next time.